On this edition for Saturday, April 21st, family members and dignitaries pay their respects to former First Lady Barbara Bush. North Korea says it will stop nuclear and long-range missile tests. And in our signature segment, more Republican women running for office for the first time. Next on PBS NewsHour Weekend.
From the Tisch WNET studios at Lincoln Center in New York, Hari Srinivasan.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. Former presidents and first ladies joined mourners at the funeral of former First Lady Barbara Bush today in Houston, Texas. Mrs. Bush died Tuesday at the age of 92. This morning, her husband of 73 years, former President George H.W. Bush, arrived in a wheelchair, attended to by their son, former President George W. Bush. Former Presidents Barack Obama and Bill Clinton and former First Ladies Laura Bush, Michelle Obama, and Hillary Clinton attended the service at St. Martin's Episcopal Church, along with current First Lady Melania Trump. According to a White House statement, President Trump did not attend to avoid disruptions due to added security. But the president did tweet a photo of the former First Lady's White House portrait, saying, quote, "Today my thoughts and prayers are with the entire Bush family." Mrs. Bush's twin granddaughters participated in the service, and she chose her close friend, Susan Baker, historian John Meacham, and her son Jeb to deliver the eulogies. The former Florida governor remembered his mother as strict, but with a sense of humor.
Mom got us through our difficult times with consistent, take it to the bank, unconditional, but tough love. She called her style a benevolent dictatorship, but honestly, it wasn't always benevolent.
Barbara.
Susan Baker, wife of former Secretary of State James Baker and a personal friend, recalled the First Lady's passion for books and literacy.
The world respects Barbara Bush's deep passion and great effectiveness in equipping those who cannot read with the skill to do so. We all celebrate her vision and tenacious dedication to literacy.
And author John Meacham, who wrote a 2015 biography of George H.W. Bush, reminded the world of Barbara Bush's place in history.
And as the wife of one president and the mother of another, she holds a distinction that belongs to only one other American in the long history of the Republic, Abigail Adams, who was present at the creation.
In a private ceremony, Mrs. Bush was buried at the George H.W. Bush Presidential Library in College Station, Texas, next to her daughter Robin, who died from leukemia in 1953 at age 3. For more on the life of Barbara Bush, I'm joined from Houston by Mary Kate Carey, a former speechwriter for President George H.W. Bush and executive producer of 41 on 41, a documentary about his life. Thanks for joining us. You're just coming from the funeral this afternoon. What was it like?
It was really a spectacular send-off for her. Everybody had their Barbara Bush pearls on, like I do, and it was just a joyful celebration of a great, great life. It was plenty of celebrities, all kinds of people from, Chrissy Everett and Phil Mickelson, and world leaders, John Major and Brian Mulroney, people like that. But then also the home health aides and all of the women who were Mrs. Bush's personal aides over the years were all right up front with all the famous and powerful people, which tells you volumes. All the altar servers on the altar were females. You saw her young granddaughters reading from Proverbs. You saw the grandsons as pallbearers. And so it was a great statement that she made. She made a lot of the choices for the funeral herself, and it really came through that her touch was there because it was all about the next generation and just the joy of living a faithful life.
You work closely with the president, but you got to know both of them quite well. How did your friendship develop?
So I first met Barbara Bush right after we left office. I was writing speeches for the president for his post-presidential speaking tour. And I went up to Walker's Point for a day to work on speeches with some of the other writers. And President Bush surprised us and announced that we were all going to go for a swim in the ocean. And when we all said, sir, we didn't bring our bathing suits, he gave the guys his bathing suits. He had some spares. And he had me put on Mrs. Bush's bathing suit. And in we went. And it was a very cold day in May, or June, I guess it was. And in Maine, that is some cold water. So that's how I first met her, as she found me in her bathing suit going towards the ocean, and I had to explain what I was doing in it. And so I told her that her husband had loaned it to me. I didn't just go into her closet and help myself.
Yeah.
And she was unfailingly graceful to me ever after that. She was always very kind. You know, Jeb was making jokes today about the benevolent dictator. And I never saw that side of her. She was always very, very kind to me.
Yeah.
So I treasure her friendship.
You know, what's her legacy going to be? As you mentioned, there were other world leaders that came for her funeral. I mean, this is a send-off that you could say was worthy of a president.
Yeah, it was remarkable. I think she'll be remembered for her deep faith and her compassion. The stories that were told today did not surprise me one bit. I've heard them for years about all of the kind things she has done. For example, you know, when they were running for Senate in 1964, I think it was, when President Bush was running for Senate, there was a campaign volunteer who arrived. He worked the night shift in a 7-Eleven and then worked the days at the campaign. And he was half deaf and an orphan with no family. He was in his 20s, and the Bushes took him in as their own and kept him on their family payroll till he died in his 70s a few years ago. And it was this generous gesture of theirs to open their family to him, and yet they never talked about it, they never bragged about it. So many times like that. There's so many stories, but never from the Bushes. They would never talk about it themselves. So that's the kind of thing that I think people will remember, because it's so unusual. Yeah. There was one line that Susan Baker said, that she felt that Barbara Bush felt the greatest yardstick of your success in life is how you treat others. And boy, we could use more of that in the world today. I think that's what she'll be remembered for.
All right, Mary Kate Carey, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
In a surprise move, North Korea announced that starting immediately, it will close its only known nuclear test site and suspend long-range missile tests. In a speech to the ruling Workers' Party, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un said the country had achieved its goal of building a nuclear arsenal and declared it, quote, a miraculous victory, unquote. He also said the country would now focus on developing its economy. Kim's announcement comes in the run-up to a meeting next week with South Korea's president and a possible summit with President Trump later this year. The president celebrated the announcement in a tweet yesterday, writing, "This is very good news for North Korea and the world. Big progress. Look forward to our summit." A spokesperson for South Korean President Moon Jae-in also praised the decision, calling it meaningful progress for the denuclearization of the Korean peninsula, which the world wishes for. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe was more cautious.
What's important is that this motion leads to complete, verifiable, and irreversible dismantlement of North Korea's nuclear and missile programs. I want to take a close look at it.
To help make sense of North Korea's statements and motivations in the upcoming summits, we turn to Jean Lee, director of the Korea program at the Wilson Center in Washington, D.C. She was also the former bureau chief of the Associated Press in Pyongyang. So let's first start talking a little bit about definitions here. There seems to be a different definition of denuclearization for the United States versus North Korea. What do they mean by it?
For them, they've been talking about denuclearization for a long time, and they mean denuclearization of the entire Korean peninsula, not just them giving up their nuclear weapons, but the United States also removing its nuclear umbrella over the South Korean region as well as Northeast Asia.
So they're not necessarily saying that they are going to stop all of their nuclear programs. It's just specific to the nuclear test site and the missiles at this point.
Exactly. And we need to remember that even though this is such a dramatic statement, the North Koreans have said this before. It's not the first time they've agreed to suspend nuclear weapons and ballistic missile testing. Just a reminder, it was only 6 years ago that the North Koreans agreed with the United States to place a moratorium on this type of testing in exchange for significant aid and concessions. Mm-hmm. And then just a few weeks later, launched a long-range rocket. And so that deal fell apart. So it's not new. It may seem dramatic, but longtime North Korea watchers will tell you that we've heard this before.
Well, how does this factor into North Korea's long-term plan?
What we're seeing right now is really strategic messaging on the part of the North Korean leader, Kim Jong-un, to his own people. What we saw with the news that came out of North Korea just the past day was a significant moment in the making of this North Korean leader. This is going to be a treatise that is going to go down in history in North Korea. And he's telling his people, listen, we are done with this phase of nuclear testing for now, because I have done what I set out to accomplish, which was to prove to you that I can defend you with nuclear weapons that are proven to be a global threat. And that means that makes us untouchable. So he's telling his people, not only are we untouchable because we've reached this point with our nuclear weapons program, but also that it makes us a world power. And we see that in the language in that treatise. It also positions him to sit down with the leaders of South Korea and the United States in a very different position than had he done this years ago. He is trying to portray himself as a rational world leader who embraces the concept of a nuclear weapons-free world. And so he'll win simply by sitting down at that table, even if he gets nothing out of it.
What are the costs for North Korea to continue a nuclear program? I mean, this is a very poor country.
And this is partly why he's telling his people, look, I know that we've sacrificed a lot by pouring our meager resources into this extremely costly nuclear weapons program that has taken quite a toll economically, not only in terms of the cost, but in terms of sanctions as well. The North Koreans have been living with sanctions for decades, but they've certainly been stepped up. The elites of Pyongyang know that sanctions are going to start to take a significant bite in their economy and their way of life. And so that's something that he's telling his people as well. I did this as an investment in our defense, and now I can step back from that and refocus those resources into the economy.
All right, Jean Lee of the Wilson Center joining us from Washington. Thanks so much.
Thank you for having me.
Watch Jeb Bush's eulogy for his mother, former First Lady Barbara Bush. Visit pbs.org/newshour. There are a record-breaking number of women running for office this campaign season. The majority are Democrats, many driven by opposition to the Trump presidency. But more Republican women are running as well. We decided to follow one who's running for state senate in the very red state of Indiana. It's a local race, but as Megan Thompson finds, it reflects a divided Republican Party and a divided nation.
Oh, I can see him. He's working in the kitchen. My name's Corey Meyer. I'm running for state senate.
On a recent cold and rainy afternoon, Corey Meyer walked door to door in Zionsville, a suburb of Indianapolis.
I'm a first-time candidate. I'm a small business owner.
Meyer is an urban planner and runs a consulting business. She's worked in city government, but has never held elected office.
I want to focus the policies that I work on workforce and economic legislation.
Meyer wants a seat in the Indiana State Senate, which will decide the state budget next year and could reform the way congressional districts are drawn. She's running in the May 8th Republican primary against Mike Delph, a 12-year incumbent who's never had a primary challenge. Meyer says knocking on doors is her favorite part of campaigning.
Great.
I'd love to have your support on May 8th.
That sounds cool. Thanks for coming by in the rain.
Yeah, no problem.
Right? Good
yeah,
luck.
Thank you. It's
All
good
right.
to see you.
All right, thanks.
You are a Republican challenging a Republican incumbent.
Yeah.
Why did you decide to run?
I got frustrated with our age of turbulent politics, and I decided that I was going to get in the game. We will leave them a note saying, sorry to miss you.
Meyer is one of 75 women running for the Indiana State Legislature, double the number of 4 years ago. As in the rest of the country, the surge of women is mostly on the Democratic side, but the number of Republican women running here is up too, 23 compared to 15 in 2014.
We're fortunate to have 5 of our 7 statewide offices held by women, Republican women.
GOP strategist Jennifer Hallowell says it's a point of pride that Republican women hold so many state offices here: lieutenant governor, auditor, secretary of state, treasurer, and school superintendent.
Also, the 2 women who serve Indiana in the congressional delegation are Republican women. And so we're well represented in a lot of ways, but we need to keep striving for more women to run for office.
So what motivates Republican women to run for office?
I think that women are motivated by issues similar to men. You know, whether it's taxes or the economy, jobs, but I reject this whole notion of women's issues because every issue is a woman's issue.
Similarly, Corey Meyer, a 40-year-old mother of two, says she doesn't feel the need to emphasize the fact that she's a woman when she's campaigning door to door.
I figure my face would tell them that. But believe it or not, they bring it up to me. I have had 70-year-old men say to me, "You're a woman. The women are going to make the difference. They're going to create change, and I'll vote for you because you are a woman." So while I don't necessarily carry that banner, the voters are carrying that banner.
Why don't you necessarily carry that banner?
Because I'm qualified for this position, and I think that regardless of my gender, I know that I can succeed.
Laura Wilson is an assistant professor of political science at the University of Indianapolis.
The gendered aspect, especially for the more conservative women, isn't going to play the same kind of role that it would elsewhere, or certainly for a more liberal woman. And really with voters, I'm not sure that that would really resonate with your average Hoosier voter.
With the Republican primary just a few weeks away, Corey Meyer is focused on raising money. She spends several hours a week making calls with the help of a professional fundraiser.
How much do I ask him for? $500. Hi Nate, this is Corey Meyer calling. Would you consider supporting the campaign at $500?
There are no polls on this local race, but Meyer's picked up some big endorsements. 2 firefighters unions, the district's 4 Republican mayors, and the Indianapolis Chamber of Commerce all support her. And she's attending fundraisers across the district, which covers a portion of Indianapolis and its suburbs.
Hi, Corey Meyer. Nice to see you. Corey Meyer, very nice to meet you. Can we put a sign in your yard?
I'd be happy to do that.
All right.
About 30 supporters gathered recently at this fundraiser in Carmel, where Meyer lives, to hand over checks and hear her pitch.
I am running for effective workforce and economic legislation.
As of the last campaign finance filing in January, Meyer's opponent had $200,000 on hand. Meyer had $60,000, but says she's doubled that since. Her opponent, Mike Delph, is a lawyer and a major in the Army Reserve. He's developed a reputation in the local media as a socially conservative and sometimes controversial Republican. He's known for a bill to crack down on illegal immigration, aspects of which some in his own party opposed. And he pushed contentious bills requiring abortion doctors to tell women that life begins at conception and a fetus may feel pain. In 2014, Delph led a controversial fight to ban gay marriage in Indiana. When the bill didn't pass, he launched an overnight Twitter barrage that made headlines. In a statement to NewsHour Weekend, Delph said his focus has always been to apply conservative principles to his work. He highlighted his work to cap property taxes, pass an income tax cut, and an initiative to raise money for veterans. And he said he's taking his primary challenge very seriously.
Well, I'll just close with one question that I get a lot is what makes you different? You know, how are you different from Senator Delph?
Corey Meyer doesn't attack her opponent on the issues, but she does draw a contrast.
I would use 3 words to differentiate myself: effectiveness, collaboration, that's just in my soul, and then inclusion.
And Meyer is pointedly not focusing on the hot-button social issues that have been divisive in Indiana and across the nation. In her literature, she touts herself as a pro-life conservative, but
my focus is really going to be around business issues, and it will not focus on abortion.
She's a strong supporter of the Second Amendment, but
there's a balance between having the right to own the gun and creating a safe environment.
And she's turned off by efforts to ban gay marriage.
I think that our obligation as a society is to love on each other and not to place judgment.
This isn't surprising to Professor Laura Wilson. She says while Republican women fall all along the philosophical spectrum, for many, social issues aren't what drives them.
A number of them, really do stand in the more moderate wings of the Republican Party, and I see them as kind of the new Republicans, where they may have been involved in the party for a really long time, but they're looking at economic, fiscal responsibility.
Wilson says, gender aside, the Mike Delph-Cory Meyer race is also a case study of the wider battle within the Republican Party between its more conservative and moderate wings.
Where you have someone like Delph who's more extreme, more outspoken within the party, even in Indiana, and then you have someone like Meyer who's, a new voice.
Yet another issue at play here, President Trump lost this district in 2016. All across the nation, Democrats are targeting Republican incumbents in moderate districts like this, looking to pick up seats in both the U.S. House and state legislatures. GOP insiders in Indiana fear that if the more moderate Cory Meyer loses the primary, this seat could flip Democratic in November.
That's a good boy.
So how do Republican candidates talk about President Trump in districts he lost? It turns out, not easily.
Hi, my name's Cory Meyer. I'm running for state senate.
You are? So
Yeah.
are you a Trump supporter?
I respect Mr. Trump. He's our president.
Are you a Trump supporter?
Well, he's done a lot of good things. He's done our business.
Are you a Trump supporter?
Okay. Yes, I like the policies. No, I don't like his Twitter.
You don't like his manner.
Yes.
But you like the results.
Yes.
While Meyer's negotiating her public position on Trump, she's also personally conflicted. On one hand, there are all the issues with women, from the alleged affairs to the Access Hollywood tape.
How do you view all that?
That is disturbing to me as a woman. I wouldn't want to be on the receiving end of that type of behavior.
But there's a lot she likes, too.
I think that he's made some strong business decisions for the United States. I think that he's taken a hard stance on North Korea. That's probably a great decision.
And she took a lesson from his improbable win.
He was a candidate that had never run for office before, and he won. He bucked the system.
Well, I got to give you credit. Anybody come out on a lousy day like this deserves to be voted for.
And so Meyer continues going door to door asking for votes.
Can count him as a vote.
Hoping she, too, can buck the system.
See you later, buddy.
This is PBS NewsHour Weekend, Saturday.
In a series of tweets this morning, President Trump attacked a New York Times reporter for a story about his relationship with his longtime personal lawyer, Michael Cohen. In the article, the Times cited interviews with half a dozen people familiar with Trump and Cohen's relationship. Trump advisor Roger Stone was quoted as saying the president treated Cohen like garbage. The article also suggested that Trump's lawyers are concerned that Cohen, whose office and hotel room were raided by the FBI on April 9th, may provide incriminating evidence against the president in the Russia investigation. On that point, Mr. Trump tweeted, "Most people will flip if the government lets them out of trouble, even if it means lying or making up stories. Sorry, I don't see Michael doing that despite the horrible witch hunt and the dishonest media." And the Washington Post is reporting that Attorney General Jeff Sessions told White House counsel Don McGahn last weekend he may resign if the president fires Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein. Rosenstein is overseeing the investigation. In another tweet, Mr. Trump again questioned the legitimacy of the Russia investigation, claiming it's an illegal act started when former FBI Director James Comey leaked documents to the press. 1 week after U.S., French, and British airstrikes targeted Syrian facilities in retaliation for a suspected chemical weapons attack, international inspectors are headed to the site of that attack in the town of Douma. Government forces now control Douma, and today Syrian state television showed rebels and their families evacuating 3 more towns near Damascus. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has expanded an E. coli warning to include all types of romaine lettuce. At least 53 people in 16 states have fallen ill after consuming romaine lettuce grown in the Yuma, Arizona area. Since most packaging does not specify the growing region, the warning now includes not only chopped romaine lettuce, but whole heads and hearts of romaine. No deaths have been reported. Finally tonight, Amnesty International honored former NFL quarterback Colin Kaepernick today, giving him its Ambassador of Conscience Award for his kneeling protests while the national anthem played at NFL games. At the ceremony in Amsterdam, Kaepernick described police killings of blacks and Latinos as lawful lynchings and added, "How can you stand for the national anthem of a nation that preaches and propagates freedom and justice for all that is so unjust to so many of the people living there?" Previous winners of the award include Nelson Mandela, the band U2, and musician Peter Gabriel. That's all for this edition of PBS NewsHour Weekend. I'm Hari Srinivasan. Thanks for watching. Have a good night.